The Air National Guard, also known as the Air Guard, is a federal military reserve force as well as the militia air force of each U.S. state, the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and the territories of Guam and the U.S.Virgin Islands.It, along with each state's Army National Guard component, makes up the National Guard of each state and the districts, commonwealths and territories as applicable. When Air National Guard units are used under the jurisdiction of the state governor, they are fulfilling the militia role. However, if federalized by order of the President of the United States, ANG units become an active part of the United States Air Force. They are jointly administered by the states and the National Guard Bureau, a joint bureau of the Army and Air Force that oversees the National Guard of the United States. Air National Guard units are organized and federally recognized federal military reserve forces in each of the 50 U.S. states, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, the territories of Guam and the U.S.Virgin Islands, and the District of Columbia of the United States. Each state, the District of Columbia and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico each have a minimum of one ANG flying unit with either assigned aircraft or aircraft shared with a unit of the active duty Air Force under an associate arrangement. The ANG of the territories of Guam and the Virgin Islands have no aircraft assigned and perform ground support functions. Air National Guard activities may be located on active duty Air Force bases, Air Reserve bases, naval air stations, joint reserve bases, or Air National Guard bases and stations which are either independent military facilities or collocated as tenants on civilian-controlled joint civil military airports. ANG units typically operate under Title 32 U.S.C. However, when operating under Title 10 U.S.C., all ANG units are operationally gained by an active-duty USAF Major Command. ANG units of the Combat Air Forces based in the continental United States, plus a single Air Control Squadron of the Puerto Rico ANG, are gained by the Air Combat Command. Conversely, CONUS-based ANG units in the Mobility Air Forces, plus the Puerto Rico ANG's Airlift Wing and the Virgin Islands ANG's Civil Engineering Squadron are gained by the Air Mobility Command. The vast majority of ANG units fall under either ACC or AMC. However, there remain a few exceptions, such as the Alaska ANG, Hawaii ANG, and Guam ANG, whose CAF and MAF units are operationally gained by Pacific Air Forces, while a smaller number of ANG units in CONUS are operationally gained by Air Education and Training Command, Air Force Global Strike Command, Air Force Special Operations Command, Air Force Space Command, and United States Air Forces in Europe, Air Forces Africa. Overview. Established under Title 10 and Title 32 of the U.S. Code, the Air National Guard is part of the State National Guard and is divided up into units stationed in each of the 50 states, the District of Columbia, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, and the 2 U.S. territories. Each state, the District of Columbia and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, have at least one Air National Guard wing-level unit with a flying mission, while the Air National Guard in Guam and the U.S.Virgin Islands are strictly non-flying support organizations. When not in a federal status, the Air National Guard operates under the respective state, commonwealth or territorial governor. The exception to this rule is the District of Columbia Air National Guard. As a federal district, the units of the D.C. ANG are under the direct jurisdiction of the President of the United States, though the office of the Commanding General, District of Columbia National Guard, in their state role. The Air National Guard may be called up for active duty by the governors to help respond to domestic emergencies and disasters, such as those caused by hurricanes, floods, fires, and earthquakes. In the case of the D.C. Air National Guard in this role, the Adjutant General of the District of Columbia reports to the Mayor of the District of Columbia, who may only activate DCANG assets for local purposes after consulting with the President of the United States. With the consent of state governors or equivalents, members or units of the Air National Guard may be appointed temporarily or indefinitely to be federally recognized members of the armed forces in the active or inactive service of the United States. If federally recognized, the member or unit becomes part of the Air National Guard of the United States, which is one of two reserve components of the United States Air Force, and part of the National Guard of the United States. Because both State Air National Guard and the Air National Guard of the United States relatively go hand in hand, they are both usually referred to as just Air National Guard. Air National Guard of the United States units or members may be called up for federal active duty in times of congressionally sanctioned war or national emergency. The President may also call up members in units of the Air National Guard using a process called federalization, with the consent of state governors or equivalents, to repel invasion, suppress rebellion, or execute federal laws if the United States or any of its states or territories are invaded or is in danger of invasion by a foreign nation, or if there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion against the authority of the federal government, or if the President is unable to execute the laws of the United States with the regular armed forces. The United States Air National Guard has about 110,000 men and women in service. Like the Air Force Reserve Command, the ANG is often described as a reserve force of part-time airmen, although the demands of maintaining modern aircraft mean that many AFRC and ANG members work full-time, either as full-time Air Reserve technicians or active Guard and Reserve personnel. Even traditional part-time Air Guardsmen, especially pilots, navigators, combat systems officers, air battle managers and enlisted aircrew, often serve 100 or more man-days annually. As such, the concept of Air National Guard service as representing only 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year is not necessarily valid. The Air National Guard, in tandem with the U.S. Air Force's other reserve component, the strictly federal Air Force Reserve Command, comprise the Air Reserve component of the U.S. Air Force under the total force construct. Many ANG pilots work for commercial airlines, but in the ANG they may train to fly any of the aircraft in the USAF inventory, with the current exception of the B-1B Lancer and B-52 Stratofortress bombers, a 3-century AWACS aircraft, KC-10 extender and the AC-130 gunship. The Georgia Air National Guard and the Kansas Air National Guard previously flew the B-1B Lancer prior to converting to the E-8 Joint Stars and KC-135R Stratotanker, respectively. In addition, the 131st Fighter Wing of the Missouri Air National Guard recently transitioned from flying the F-15CD Eagle at St. Louis International Airport, Lambert Field Air National Guard Station to the B-2 Spirit at Whiteman AFB as an associate unit of the regular Air Force's 509th Bomb Wing and was redesignated as the 131st Bomb Wing. In 2012, General Norton A. Schwartz, the then Chief of Staff of the Air Force, defended cutting nearly twice as many service members from the Air National Guard and the Air Force Reserve as from the active-duty USAF, in order to maintain the service's surge and rotational capabilities in the active-duty regular Air Force. These proposals were eventually overruled and cancelled by the U.S. Congress. chain of command. As state militia units, the units in the Air National Guard are not in the normal United States Air Force chain of command. They are under the jurisdiction of the United States National Guard Bureau unless they are federalized by order of the President of the United States. The Air National Guard Readiness Center, a field operating center of the United States Air Force at Joint Base Andrews, Maryland, performs operational and technical functions to ensure combat readiness of Air National Guard units and is a channel of communication between the Air Force and the National Guard Bureau regarding readiness and operations. Air National Guard units are trained and equipped by the United States Air Force. The state ANG units, depending on the mission, are operationally gained by a major command of the USAF if federalized. In addition, personnel and equipment are routinely federalized and deployed by the USAF as part of Air and Space Expeditionary Forces, and are currently engaged in combat operations under United States Air Force's Central as part of the global war on terrorism. Air National Guard personnel are expected to adhere to the same moral and physical standards as their full-time, active-duty Air Force and part-time Air Force Reserve federal counterparts. The same ranks and insignia of the U.S. Air Force are used by the Air National Guard, and Air National Guardsmen are eligible to receive all United States military awards. The Air National Guard also bestows a number of state awards for local services rendered in a service member's home state or equivalent.